Welcome to episode 30 of Detour 365. This is William, the host, and I'll be joined by Bill and Nathaniel this evening as we look at Genesis chapter 19.
The two angels came to Sodom that evening when Lot was sitting at the gate of Sodom. Lot saw them, got up to greet them, and prostrated himself on the ground. He said, Here now, my lords, please come over to your servant's house. Spend the night, wash your feet, get up early, and go on your way. No, they answered, we'll stay in the square. But he kept pressing them. So they went home with him, and he made them a meal, baking matzah for their supper, which they ate. But before they could go to bed, the men of the city surrounded the house, young and old, everyone from every neighborhood of Sodom. They called Lot and said to him, Where are the men who came to stay with you tonight? Bring them out to us. We want to have sex with them. Lot went out to them and stood in the doorway, closing the door behind him, and said, Please, my brothers, don't do such a wicked thing. Look here, I have two daughters who are virgins. Please let me bring them out to you, and you can do with them what seems good to you. But don't do anything to these men, since they are guests in my house. Stand back, they replied. This guy came to live here, and now he's decided to play judge. For that, we'll deal warts with you. Then they crowded in on Lot in order to get close enough to break down the door. But the men inside reached out their hands and brought Lot into the house to them and shut the door. Then they struck the men at the door of the house with blindness, both small and so that they couldn't find the doorway. The men said to Lot, Do you have any people here besides yourselves? Whomever you have in the city, son-in-law, your sons, your daughters, bring them out of this place, because we are going to destroy it. Adonai has become aware of the great outcry against them, and Adonai has sent us to destroy it. Lot went out and spoke with his sons-in-law who had married his daughters and said, Get up and leave this place because Adonai is going to destroy the city. But his sons-in-law did not take him seriously. When morning came, the angels told Lot to hurry up. Get out, they said, and take your wife and your two daughters who are here. Otherwise, you will be swept away in the punishment of the city. But he dallied. So the men took hold of his hand, his wife's hand, and the hands of his two daughters. Adonai was being merciful to him and led them, leading them outside the city. When they had brought them out, he said, Flee for your life. Don't look behind you and don't stop anywhere in the plain, but escape to the hills. Otherwise, you will be swept away. Lot said to them, Please, no, my lord. Here your servant has already found favor in your sight, and you have shown me even greater mercy by saving my life. But I can't escape to the hills because I'm afraid the disaster will overtake me and I will die. Look, there's a town nearby to flee to, and it's a small one. Please let me escape there. Isn't it just a small one? And that away will I stay alive. He replied, All right, I agree to what you have asked. I won't overthrow the city of which you have spoken. Hurry and escape to that place because I can't do anything until you arrive there. For this reason, the city was named Zoar, which is small. By the time Lot had come to Zoar, the sun had risen over the land. Then Adonai caused sulfur and fire to rain down upon Sodom and Gomorrah from Adonai out of the sky. He overthrew those cities, the entire plain, all the inhabitants of the cities, and everything around. But his wife looked back from behind him, and she became a column of salt. Abraham got up early in the morning, went to the place where he had stood before Adonai, and looked out towards Sodom and Gomorrah, scanning the entire plain. There before him, the smoke was rising from the land like smoke from a furnace. But when God destroyed the cities of the plain, he remembered Abraham and sent Lot out away from the destruction when he overthrew the cities in which Lot lived.
Very good. Well, not very good, but I guess good reading, you know.
Thank you.
I'm wondering if it said that I early on in your reading you mentioned that he made matzah. I
Which
just
is
have unleavened bread.
bread.
Yeah.
Unleavened bread.
Uh, I'm figuring that was the same bread that Abraham had Sarah make for the guests.
Yeah.
Because you can't, it takes a while for bread to leaven, right? It takes
yeah,
some time. And I mention this because it's interesting how this interaction with Lot and the two angels really mirrors the interaction with Abraham in a lot of ways. You know, he bowed himself to the ground, he invited them in, he fed them.
yeah, that's what I noted down when I was listening as well. Could these be
Yeah.
the same people? The angels and the two men that were with Abraham or with the Lord.
Oh yes, yeah, they are this, and they are the same, and it also, you know, I thought about whether or not to include this in the series that we're looking at, but it really does seem with when Lot is kind of negotiating with them about, you know, let me go to this small city, and then it does seem that these two angels are in direct communication with the Lord as they decide not to overthrow that city, you know, that small city that he wants to go to. So that's kind of, I guess, you know, even though the Lord isn't present in the same way in this story, it does seem like God is present in these events, and dealing with Lot and his, I guess kind of the theme is going to be Lot's like hesitation and his, well, first off, I do want to ask this question, and you might know the answer to it if it's possible to know the answer to it. I found it interesting that Lot, you know, Abraham's living in a tent. He's still he still has that lifestyle of being a man of livestock, basically. You know, he's keeps flocks and herds, and he's living kind of out, not in a city. Lot was doing the same stuff that Abraham was doing, and they separated because their flocks and herds got too large. And then Lot ended up settling near the city of Sodom. And it seems like Lot has become a city dweller. Like he has a house. It said he has a house. It says it several times. He has a house, he has a door. You know, he's not living in a tent. He's living in some sort of structure in the city, and he's kind of become part of the city. Some people say that it seems that Lot was involved in the city's, this comment about him being the judge, that he is possibly involved in the politics of the city. He's kind of
Well,
become enmeshed in the city.
he's sitting in the gate, and
Yeah.
usually the people who were sitting in the gate of the cities at this time were part of the leadership of the city in some manner.
It makes you wonder, though, like how complicit was he? It does seem like he's kind of a people, and I'm going to be a little bit harsh towards him. That it does seem like he's kind of the people pleaser. He's not really taking a stand against the. He hasn't moved away from the city. There's something there that's keeping him there. Perhaps some kind of economic benefit to being in that, population center. But if he's an elder of the city, and just judging by how he interacts with the men that are trying to basically break his door down and take his guests, he's trying to appease them. He's not really.
Yeah, apparently he gets along with these people fine.
Yeah.
Well, can we not skip over the part where all the men wanted to like have sex with these two angel dudes?
Yeah, I mean that
not super random.
Well,
that's the
I mean,
first thing that they said, and also like, is that part of? Is there like, is this what's written here? Like, is this like a poor summary of a larger text somewhere else? Because that seems to just completely lack context. It feels like it's a part of a like how we had discussed what's that larger text that was taken out of the Bible, and yet is summarized incompletely a couple of different places.
Oh, you're talking about the Book of Enoch?
Yes, the Book of Enoch.
Where you type, yeah.
That feels like something that's been contracted to me. It just lacks so much context. I don't know.
Well, it definitely shows like the moral decay of the people of the city.
That's not just moral decay. That's like just completely random. Like, what?
Yeah. I mean,
why those two guys? I mean, there are people that come and go from the town all day long. Like, why two people come into the city? That's not normal. Like, what's going on here?
I mean, that is a good question. I don't know if they
don't know how many strangers normally come and go.
Well, we just talked about the fact that it was a economic center. An economic center is formed by trade, really, right? So strangers aplenty, I would think.
Well,
and they discussed the fact that it was a large town, not a small one.
Yeah, I mean that is kind of a mystery with this. And I mean it could be, I don't know. I mean I can speculate that it could be a custom they had that if you came to do business in the town, that you had to join in with their activities. And it does say the whole town. It says like young and old and people from every quarter, sort of. So it does kind of make you wonder.
It was an odd. It was an odd happening.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess there are some things in the Bible that feel a bit, in my mind, they feel a bit contrived. Like, did that really happen? Like, that kind of thing. Some things like that make me question some of the things written as they are. to be honest.
Well, there certainly are people who were
Like
like
it feels like a
that.
contrived device to illustrate the immorality of the town. Like I understand why it is likely to be there, maybe, but it doesn't feel like that's telling an accurate story.
Well, I can see where we would have had towns like this where uh, where people uh, where people with this proclivity gathered
Yeah.
because it was safe.
Okay.
And it would have been just, it would have been okay. Now, why Lot ended up there, I it does not speak well of Lot. Uh,
Well, and the other
Like I
question I
mean,
have is,
but whatever it was that was powering this
yeah,
desire for all these townspeople to have sex with these guys was very powerful because in return, in order to appease the crowd, he offered his two daughters.
yeah,
That's just
yeah.
insane. Like whatever it was, like he knew that they weren't going to stop somehow. Like that wasn't some normal, any kind of normal thing.
It could have
yeah,
been some sort of spiritual situation where they were possessed with the desire to do this.
I guess. I mean, they were angels in the story here, so I don't know, but
I mean, it seems like something came over them. And also the other question I have, and this is probably one of those unanswered things. Lot's son-in-laws were in the city, it seems,
yes,
but they weren't in the crowd that were outside of his house.
yeah, correct.
So it could be, there is a literary device that is used. um what's the word I'm looking for? Not exaggerated, but when it said everybody was out there, it could just mean like most of the town, or a good number of people were outside of his house.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. It does seem to be a bit inconsistent with itself,
Not
with its
not
phrasing.
exaggerated, but
All the
it's a
men from
word that
every part
begins
of the
with a
city of
P.
Sodom.
What's that?
Yeah, I mean it because it does say all the men from every part of the city of Sodom, and then it does say later about talks about men that weren't there.
Or
Because
we would assume so, because the ones that were outside of the house of Lot were struck with blindness.
right,
Yeah. So, um, it's one of those situations where I mean, I know there is hyperbole. That's what I was thinking of. You know, there's sometimes there's a little bit of hyperbole used in the stories.
yeah, you wonder how
Especially when
much
it
of
says everybody was there.
you. It makes me wonder how much of like this was because we kind of take this as a direct account, right? But perhaps
Yeah.
it's ultimately written by a human and maybe from a couple of different sources. I don't know. Who was this written by?
I
It's
believe
Genesis.
Genesis was, well, it was,
Moses.
wasn't it written by, yeah, it was written by Moses, right?
Hmm.
And so it was an oral account that was passed down, and then Moses was the one who wrote, Genesis and Exodus, and
Leviticus.
yeah. Um, so I mean those are questions. I did find it interesting that Lot tries to, let me see what my notes say. He tries to appease this crowd,
Quick.
offering his, what's that?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go
Whenever,
ahead.
well, I was just gonna ask, because you went to seminary and everything. Is there anything kind of generally mentioned in all that? Because I doubt that this is the only like relatively small inconsistency you can find within texts in the Bible. Is there anything that they address that in general sense with, like any kind of reasoning?
Oh, behind Lot offering his daughters, or
No, just like
the
general small
townspeople?
inconsistencies like this that may be translational things or may not, but
I mean, it is a literary tool that's used sometimes to, just like the flood. There's a debate about the flood of, the flood in Noah's time, if it, the scope of it, because it says the
mhm.
whole world. Is it talking about the whole world that they knew of? Is it talking about,
Yeah.
it was sufficient to wipe out what needed to be wiped out, for
Mm.
sure. But, there are instances where, if you look at like Near Eastern culture and the way they told accounts of things, they sometimes use hyperbole when communicating communicating those things. So that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking it was a sampling of many different ages or generations of people from different parts of the city that gathered around Lot's house. That's what I'm thinking. It seems
Yeah,
like his son-in-laws weren't there.
would have just been a bunch of people around his house. Couldn't have been everybody. Too many people in the city for everyone in the city to have been there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I think as well. Yeah. Um, it is interesting that, Lot tries to offer his daughters to this crowd. Um, it seems that Lot knew who these visitors were. Do you get the impression that he had some awareness who they were, that they weren't just two regular like travelers that were there? There was something special about them. I kind of get that
Well,
impression, but
well, yes,
Well,
because
Lot immediately recognized him, and I don't think he had warning, did he?
um, warning that they were going to be there.
Right.
No, no. I mean, it doesn't seem like he did.
well, he prostrated himself on the ground before them when they showed up at the gate of the city. So there was something that made him aware of of their significance. I mean, if you look, it was there in verse 1. Lot saw them, got up to greet them, and prostrated himself on the ground. He was at least one of the head dudes of the city, and he prostrated himself. You'd only do that before someone that you knew to be of significance.
Yeah.
And let me look at a different translation here. What does it say in the NIV? How does he call them there in one of the other translations in verse 2?
Let's see. Lot was sitting at the gate. Lot saw
It says,
them and
"My
he rose
lords."
to. Yeah.
He calls them my lords. Again, a greeting toward high rank.
Well, he says, "My lords, please turn aside to your servant's house." So yeah.
A
I don't think
greeting
that
toward,
was just regular hospitality, though. I mean,
No. But well, that's the point he's making.
uh,
I agree.
you know, a greeting toward high-ranking individuals. For whatever reason, he knew these people were people to be revered.
I think
And
he
he
knew. Well, I think he knew who they were for whatever reason.
hmm. Yeah, it is something that we're not necessarily given, but I mean, it does seem like he knew, or at least had some kind of sense as to their importance. Yeah.
Did he know they were angels? He knew they were really important.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that back then they might say the same thing to extraordinary individuals. "My lords, please turn to your servant's house." Yeah.
Hmm. So when I've heard messages and just general thoughts about this passage, people have mentioned that offering his daughters would have been common practice but it doesn't seem like it. I mean, you wouldn't offer
No.
if you were entertaining stranger, even in that
No
culture.
way.
I don't see that you would offer your daughters in
No,
place
that's
of.
like half the value of your house or something or whatever, right? Like,
Yeah, right. um and he doesn't have any sons, and his daughters were already engaged, it
yeah,
seems
even
to.
that. Yeah,
So, yeah.
that'd be crazy.
Yeah.
How happy would his sons-in-laws be?
So what do you all make of the fact that his sons-in-laws don't believe him? Lot certainly isn't. It seems like Lot was doing really well when he was with Abraham, and that could be that
I don't think that speaks poorly of Lot, if that's what you're inferring.
his
Because
son-in-laws didn't believe him.
yeah, because in fact, it's probably more often than not. I feel like in the Bible where the good guy is trying to like get out this information and people just don't believe him. Like Noah, like it doesn't speak poorly of Noah that no one believed him essentially. Um, It almost seems
Yeah.
very similar too, right? Like big destruction. One guy is the crazy guy saying, "We're oh, it's the end of the world," you know.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Huh.
I mean, it is his family members in this case, though. But
Yeah,
their
you would think. I
sons-in-law,
mean,
so I don't know. I didn't read too much into that personally, but maybe one should. I don't know.
it is mentioned, so that I'm wondering if there's any significance to it aside from, because we get the story later on about Lot and his daughters and what happens. I wonder if we're just given this information just to show that this is how he ended up with his daughters living in a cave later on, or if this says something about Lot's general character. I mean, is he kind of wishy washy? Is he kind of
Well, certainly Lot's son-in-laws did not have much respect for him.
yeah,
Hmm.
Uh, he was only there, because they had the hots for his daughters. Uh, and they didn't really care about Lot. And that, I think, also would have been somewhat peculiar for the time.
hmm.
You know, there should have been at least some respect for the father of your wives. And they did not exhibit any respect for the father of the women they were to marry.
Well, on the other hand, it didn't actually say that they disregarded him. It said, but his sons-in-law thought he was joking. That's not the same, even if they were idiots, apparently. That is
Yeah,
not the same as saying they disregarded or didn't respect him. They thought he was
Well,
joking, apparently, even though that doesn't really hold a lot of water. Like you'd think that
yeah,
someone you dealt with regularly, you could tell if they were joking about something like this or not. You could have like a real conversation and be like, "Hey, are you joking?" No, I'm really not joking. You know, but this feels like
yeah,
a movie where it's like, how
yeah,
in movies like two people talk and it's like, come on, just have a real conversation and exchange information, please, God, like, but and this feels like the same thing where like it just feels, I don't know, that part of it again makes me feel like it's just a little bit inaccurate, I'll say, because like his sons-in-law thought he was joking. That's not a real life situation.
I wonder how seriously Lot
Feels like just a
really took.
story.
Well, I wonder how seriously he really took the news. When the angels said we're going to destroy the city, how because it does say that he hesitated, and they ended up having to physically remove him and his family from the city. So it almost seems like he didn't fully believe what was going to happen. It seems like he didn't fully, like there was some doubt mixed in, or
Hmm.
he didn't take them seriously. um I don't know, it seems like he wasn't fully bought into the whole idea that the city was going to be destroyed and that he needed to leave. So he might have gone to his sons-in-law and kind of been not all that convincing. I mean, I could see that. I could see that. Um,
It could also be he hesitated in relation to his sons-in-law because the hesitation section directly
right.
follows the failure of him to communicate that, but or pretty much.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
I don't know. It could be a lack of faith in what was going to happen, or a lack of belief in what was going to happen.
Well, yeah.
And it is interesting that it says, God took him out of the city because or had the men or the angels seize him and his wife and his two daughters. It says seize them by the hand because the Lord was merciful to him. So I mean that, despite his hesitation and his, because he was kind of dragging his feet. I mean, it does seem that way. Um, he didn't want to leave. I guess that's basically
Yeah.
it. Um,
He was the boy.
oh, what's that?
He, he was comfortable there. They apparently had a decent life there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does seem like that. I mean, and also the fact that his wife looked back, that, I think this says something about being on a very basic level. It says something about being attached to comfortable circumstances, even if you know that it's going to, because he knew that on some level he knew that the city was going to be destroyed, but he was still attached to the city, maybe vainly, maybe hoping
I mean,
that it wouldn't be
I,
destroyed.
yeah, I guess. I mean, some hesitation would be expected when leaving the place you've lived for years.
Yeah.
The next thing I didn't understand here was when Lot said, "But I can't flee to the mountains. This disaster will overtake me, and I'll die." I don't understand that sentence like at all.
Yeah, especially since he ends up actually fleeing to the mountains actually after he flees to this
Hmm.
little town. To me, it seems like his desire to flee to this town is he's wanting to stay,
Think
he's
he's
gotten
making
used to.
excuses to try to stay in a city kind of thing?
Yeah, that's kind of what I've
Yeah.
been thinking, that he has become a city dweller or a town person, that he wants to. So do you get the impression that he's totally out of the business that he was in? Like, when he was with Abraham, he had flocks and herds, and he was,
Yeah, if
doing
he's
that
living
sort
in
of
the
thing.
middle of the city, I don't think he's certainly not the direct owner of flocks and herds. Well, maybe he's the owner,
Yeah.
not the caretaker.
Yeah, he has become somehow a city dweller, a merchant, something of that sort.
Hmm. So yeah, I mean, it does seem like he was attached to a certain lifestyle, didn't want to change. Um, but as we see later on in the chapter, he does end up fleeing to the mountains, and he lives in a cave with his daughters, which is kind of leads to other things. But um, yeah, I just there's a lot about Lot. There's a lot. There's trying to not use the word Lot outside of his name. Let's see. So there is a difference between Lot and Abraham. I mean, definitely. And it just seems that even though they are similar in their reaction, they don't, they acknowledge that there's something special about these visitors, but Lot definitely reacts differently, and he's kind of, he's hesitant, he's dragging his feet, um and we don't see a whole bunch. I mean, there's not much more about Lot after this chapter. Do you get the feeling that God was merciful towards him because of his ties with Abraham, or just that Lot was kind of a righteous guy, sort of, like kind of lukewarm, in a lukewarm sort of way?
It felt to me like it was just his tie with Abraham, kind of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
Um,
Just because Abraham loved him.
yeah. Um, so Lot's wife looking back. Um,
Well, then again, Lot did greet them and say that he was his servant. He was their
yeah,
servant.
yeah.
That's easy to say, though.
Um, I mean, what do you get out of the fact that they allowed him to go to this small city and they didn't destroy this small town because he wanted to go to it? That seemed kind of interesting, at least.
I thought they acquiesced because they had seemingly not been given, they had been told to instruct it to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah and the plain. Now, apparently, Zoar was right on the edge somewhere, and it was on the edge of things and was within that area of discretion. Abraham wanted to go to a city, so they let him. And Abraham
Yeah.
found it eventually unsuitable and he left. Or they
Lot.
actually found him unsuitable and they
Yeah.
encouraged him to leave.
Huh.
I don't see why they encouraged him to leave. That was
Oh,
not
from the small
clear.
city.
Yeah,
Um,
it was
oh,
not
it said he
clear.
was afraid to live in the city in Zoar, or at
Yeah,
least that's what it says in verse 30. But
yeah, but it doesn't. It's not clear to me why he was afraid to live in Zoar. I
yeah,
mean, he was afraid, but why was he afraid? Why why did the people in Zoar feel that he and his family were people that should be attacked?
hmm.
Uh,
Yeah. I've always kind of wondered that. I've wondered if it was because he saw the destruction and the destruction of Sodom, and that he was fleeing to Zoar, and the destruction was a lot more extensive than he thought. But it seems like maybe he tried to live there for a little bit, then it didn't work out. Is that what you're saying?
The only thing I could think about that was that, yes, he survived Sodom and Gomorrah, but they were afraid that that sort of uh, judgment would follow Lot.
Yeah, yeah, I could see that. Um, and this wasn't really in our section that we were reading, but what do you make out of him living in a cave at the end of the story? He just ends up living in a cave with his daughters, and they're kind of isolated in this cave, and they think they're the last, at least the daughters think they're the last people left on earth, and so they basically get their father drunk and that's
Start
kind of
different
how.
peoples.
Yeah.
I think it's significant that they start different peoples who become enemies of the Israelites over time.
Yeah, yeah. um yeah, that is it. I mean, it is kind of it is a tragic and cautionary story, the story of Lot, because he does take a very different path than Abraham takes. Even though maybe he means well, perhaps, sort of, but in the end, it seems like Lot really doesn't have the faith that Abraham has, that God's going to take care of him, and that, I mean, who
Oh,
knows how much he was.
Abraham does not have faith.
Abraham doesn't?
No, I don't see that Abraham has faith hardly at all.
Or are you talking about Lot or Abraham?
Oh, I'm sorry, Lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lot doesn't have faith hardly at all.
It doesn't seem like it, at least.
I mean, even though he may realize that these guys are angels, uh, he doesn't, he doesn't grasp the power and majesty and mercy and gravity associated with God.
And one question that I meant to ask earlier, do you get the picture that Lot was troubled by the situation in the city before it was overthrown? Or, because surely he knew how things were going, right? In the city of Sodom. He knew that, but he remained there anyway.
Oh, yeah. 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 Lot knew all about it.
Yeah.
And he stayed there.
Yeah.
I was just reading something about
yeah,
an expedition of archaeologists that went out and dug up or did some digging around in the Sodom Gomorrah area and found that several cities around in that area, I'm summarizing, but several cities in that area were destroyed around 1700 BC. And it seems like by some large explosion, or like there was a lot of heat and shock waves and stuff. So the theory they put forward was a meteor exploded there.
Well, that would certainly fit with the account, I would think. I mean,
It does.
that's and that would be, I mean, that would be terrifying, definitely. But um
And not, just to be clear, not that the meteor became a meteorite and struck the surface. It exploded somewhere above that area, like a large meteor exploded, which does happen. It breaks up and explodes,
yeah,
you know, and rain
there's
down
a there's a
destruction.
town in there's one that happened close to a town. Oh, actually, I'm thinking it happened. Well, there was one that happened recently, but then there was one that happened like in the early 1900s, like in the middle of Siberia, and it flattened, like charred and flattened thousands of
The
acres.
Tunguska event.
Tunguska, yeah, yeah.
And what I was referencing there, if anybody listens to that, is Stephen Collins, an archaeologist named Stephen Collins, and it's the Tal
Hmm.
El Hammam excavation project.
Huh.
Ah,
Interesting. Hmm. Well, evidently, despite despite Lot's lack of faith and his just overall indecision, God got him out of there, and he was, but he, still he ends up living in a cave, and that's not the best situation. But I'm sort of seeing that he lives in fear sort of for the rest of his life. I mean, it does kind of seem like that, or at least I mean, we're not given a whole lot of information as to, just decide that he's living in a cave. Um, but it is interesting to see the way Abraham's life goes and the way Lot's life goes, and the choices they make, and yeah, it is interesting to see the comparison between those two. And I thought I had a little more on this, but any other comments about this?
um,
Well,
uh, let's see. I had something here. Just a second. Um, and I hope not to have lost it.
Well, so maybe because I was kind of mentally disconnected from the conversation here while I was doing that research, but did we cover like what we were taking away from this?
Not really.
well, one thing certainly is,
Is it kind of just
don't
a
be
fire
like
and brimstone?
don't
Like,
be like Lot, you know.
yeah,
But
just kind of
I
bad
do
things happen to
see
bad people.
I do see a warning or a cautionary tale in the life of Lot, and that, and especially in his, it seems like he became very attached to a certain lifestyle, and um it just makes me wonder, a lot of the systems we have around us, be they economic, be they the electrical grid, a lot of different things that we think, kind of like the city of Sodom, we think that these things are going to remain forever. But, would we, and of course, Lot didn't have any warning, so I'm not necessarily faulting him for that. But I do see that we are called to be aware and ready for, because changes are going to happen. And, I'm not necessarily saying we should be preppers to an extreme extent or anything like that. But I mean, it does say in Revelation, and, we don't necessarily know how things are going to shake out. And it is kind of a logical fallacy that we have when we look at the way the world is right now, and we kind of project it into the future and assume that things are going to go on as they have been. But we need to seek God's wisdom in being able to respond to the changes that we encounter. um, and sometimes these changes are going to be dramatic, in some certain cases. If I look back in history, I often wonder, like, well, why didn't they know, or why didn't they make more of an effort to get out of that situation before? I mean, it could be I guess an example could be different revolutions and different things that have happened, and wars, and not saying that's the same as what's going to happen, what's described in Revelation, but you do see this hesitancy in people. And it's not just Lot, it's just kind of, there is a hesitancy, because sometimes change happens gradually over time, and sometimes everything changes overnight. And even if you have foreknowledge that this is all going to change tomorrow, do you have the faith and decisiveness to be ready for that? That could probably be summarized in a sentence or two, but that was just my thoughts with that.
Something that one thing that got me, I was reading in the Enduring Word commentary on this section, and in the piece talking about Lot's wife and her looking back, and said the word looking back has connotation of looking intently.
Mm.
In referring to the end times, Jesus said something interesting in Luke 17:32. Remember Lot's wife. In other words, as we see the end of the age, no Christian should have a heart like Lot's wife. We should not have a heart that longs for a corrupt and passing world. We should not have a heart that will, in some sense, regret the judgment God will bring on it. We need to look forward to our deliverance, not back at a world passing away and ripe for judgment. We need to remember that we are in a world that is steeped in sin and that does terrible things to people on a regular basis. And that the whole point in the time of judgment is to release the world and people from all of that. Lot's wife was unable to do that.
She was attached to the situation and
she
the
was attached
benefits.
to her wife there, no matter what else was going on. And, you know, we may become comfortable in the life that we are living, but we have to be able to look around us and see and remember the terrible stuff that's going on around us, and be thankful to be delivered from all of this immensely terrible stuff, and be glad that God is delivering the world from all of this pain and suffering.
Very good. Well, on that note, I guess, unless we have anything else on this, well, join us next time. Thank you for listening. And this is the end of the recorded session. Yes, we will be back. So